we reverse roles if you really want to know in more ways than one. So, and I'm going to be right back. So just give me a moment.
I'm on with Blanche. We're trying to get her into the meeting. There's a little bit of a technical difficulty, so please bear with us. By the way, we're live streaming and I'm going to start the webinar, so we'll be recording too.
Yeah, and I made the announcement, Mark. Don't worry. We'll wait a few more minutes.
Okay, Blanche is in the meeting and we are recording and live streaming, and I will now shut up.
Well, okay. I'm trying to keep notes here. I think we have an, oh, I haven't seen Doug in a while. I like the mustache. Very impressive. Very impressive. Okay, and we have a couple more people. Natasha's joining us. I see Sarah's joining us. Let's wait a few more seconds. Blanche, I see you're in. Everything copacetic, and we'll start the meeting. Let's get you unmuted so we can. Mark, can you unmute Blanche for a minute?
I tried. It's up to her.
Oh God. Oh yeah, because she's okay. Well, Blanche, I'm just giving you a heads up that when it's time to speak, you're going to have to get yourself unmuted, and I thought to do it now.
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Okay.
Hey, Julian, can I make you a co-host?
Sure. Do I have any added responsibilities, or just to know that I'm not?
So Blanche, I just wanted to make sure. I think you were going to talk to someone about taking the notes. I want to make sure that you.
I spoke with Mark.
Great. Okay. Well, Mark is back in his traditional role of notes, so I'm sorry to hear about that.
He volunteered.
I see him laughing.
No worries.
Well, I'm excited. We got a wonderful show tonight, as we say. Very, very excited. So we've got some great speakers. We've got some great topics. I'm back in my friendly home of YEL, so very excited. And we've got a reunion. We will announce the return of our new YEL member, Mark Diller. Yay! He's back and better than ever. So thanks. And he will be our host, and I guess Julian will be our co-host. So, and that's a little bit of the process in terms of making some changes in terms of how the technology works. So that works out great. I thought just to what I wanted to do was just go over the agenda as we always do. Additionally, speak a little bit about the format, so we give Susan a little bit of structure, and then I'll let Blanche do a little intro as well, or a long intro, but I'll let her do her sense of introducing Susan as well, who she's worked with. But our agenda today is to talk in general about youth issues, particularly around that are existing now and in the future. And after that, we'll talk a little bit about educational updates and get coordinated where we are, and then talk about new business and future meetings as we always do. And what I thought to do was on a format. We generally spend we want to give our guest speaker 15, 20 minutes, 10, 20, whatever, enough time to kind of speak about things in general. We'd love to hear about what you're seeing around youth specifically.
Susan and I have gone over that.
All right, well, I'll hand it off to you then. But what I'm just saying from a format is we'll do a general conversation point, and then we generally go around the room and give everyone, every person, a few minutes or so to speak. So there'll be a large Q&A point, and that'll be the process. So Blanche, why don't I hand it to you to formally introduce Susan and give any other direction?
Okay. I am very pleased to introduce to all of us Susan Matloff Nieves. Susan, do you have a nickname? If so, don't tell us. It's okay. Susan is officially, I guess, the Deputy Executive Director at Goddard Riverside. But I would say that Susan has her hands on and into many of the other service providing agencies in our community. So not only can Susan tell us about Goddard, but she can tell us a lot about the general picture of youth serving agencies in our community board area. So Susan, whatever you have to share with us is invaluable. I would also say that when we were doing our district needs statement, Susan and her colleague, Steve Puerto Rico, who has been with us a couple of times, were very helpful in giving us some actual dollar data that we included in our DNS. As some, if not all of you will remember, we went through that period in the summer where the city budget was, to say the least, uncertain. The the district youth budget was cut. The NYPD budget was redeployed. And Susan, you were very helpful in giving us some sense as to how we should structure our district needs statement. So Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you. And when we spoke earlier, you said any thoughts I had about what you might say. I think what could be helpful and would be helpful to us is telling us some of the agencies that you do have a responsibility for, and then whatever else you want to share with us. Okay?
Sounds great. And thank you, Blanche and Mark, and good evening, committee members. It's really always a delight to work with Community Board 7. I've worked with many community boards over my 40-some years in the field, and I really, really find this one of the most active and engaged that I've worked with. And can everybody hear me? Is my sound okay? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I am leaving open, just so you know, I'm leaving the chat box open because I find sometimes it's quicker to just chat. You feel free to type in thoughts or comments as I'm speaking. It's not too distracting and might help us just keep moving. And, definitely I'll welcome questions to focus afterwards. As Blanche mentioned, I am the Deputy Executive Director for Youth and Aging specifically at Goddard. I do not manage our mental health and homeless programs. That portfolio is managed by Roberta Solomon. And who is not with me, I know as Blanche mentioned, Stephen Puerto Rico is our Associate Deputy Executive Director for Youth and Aging and had every intention of being here tonight, but unfortunately he had food poisoning. And so he's unable to be with us this time, but we'll be happy to come to other meetings. At Goddard, we have a number of youth programs. We have a Beacon program that operates out of Joan of Arc. That's a comprehensive youth and community center operating out of a school building that is mostly closed at this time because of Department of Ed. So that's been an interesting challenge. We run something called Star Learning, which is a one-to-one tutoring program that matches tutors, volunteer tutors with young people. We've been conducting that 100% remotely. It's become a 7-day-a-week operation, and we're serving about, I think 133 children that way. It's a free program. We run after school and youth programming from our Bernie Wall Center on West 91st Street and Columbus, and also at Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center, which used to be a separate organization, and that merged with Goddard. And that Bernie Wall primarily serves Wise Towers and the Westside Urban Renewal buildings, and Lincoln Square primarily serves Amsterdam houses, but also the surrounding community. And our programs are open to everybody, regardless of geography. We have a college options program, which is actually nationally known. We've trained something like 6,000 school counselors on how to provide college access counseling that's equitable, so that students who normally would not be seen as college bound get access to college. And then we also support them until they graduate. So we counsel a number of about somewhere between 500 and 800 young people to get into college, and then about 500 to stay in school and finish. We have a program called Degrees NYC. It's a collaboration of 60 organizations citywide that is working to promote more equitable college going practices. And as part of that, we have a youth council of young people who are youth leaders and spokespeople in that area. And we have a learning to work program. It's actually located just on the outer edges of CB7. It's on the campus of Frederick Douglass High School at Edward J. Reynolds High School. It's a partnership with the school to help their 500 students move towards graduation, but we also provide paid internships so that they get work experience. And each young person we help to develop a realistic post-secondary plan so that they graduate with a plan in place. And we are about to launch a small internship program, a paid internship program for young people from Amsterdam houses with some private foundation funding. And I think I've covered all of our, I think that's all of our, oh, we have a small evening teen center also at Lincoln Square. That's a drop-in center. It's free, it's open to anyone in the neighborhood, and it has a focus of community problem solving to use science, technology, engineering, and math skills. We do work with our other youth serving organizations in the neighborhood. We work with the Dome and Strikers Bay. We have a relationship with the Y. We're all Hudson Guild, I think, serves some young people in the community board. So we do try to maintain a relationship with the other youth serving organizations in the community board. This year, I think, has been, because I work across the lifespan from ages 2 through older adults, we've been very aware that children and young people have been particularly affected and hard hit by the COVID crisis. It's caused isolation, disconnection from school, a cutoff from supports and trusting adult relationships that are really needed for healthy development. It's really, I think for us, we've noticed that the particularly, I guess, sort of the middle school through, well, really through college, the young people have been particularly affected because of the denial of both education and socialization. And the other group that's been very affected are senior citizens who are have been sort of forced isolated in their homes. But it's the burden on families of having to educate their children at home is particularly hard for low-income families. We have a number of parents who are essential workers who have not been able to secure childcare because their employment is informal and not necessarily recognized as essential services by the city. So even where there was childcare available, they couldn't access it. We've had a number of families who were very suddenly lost their employment because of the shrinkage of the economy, and that's caused tremendous financial hardship and stress. And while there are services available, such as expanded food stamps, it takes a while to access those. And so we've been administering a direct relief program. And I actually count that almost as an additional youth program because most of the applicants have been families. And we've seen parents who are not eligible for benefits because they had to voluntarily quit their job because there was a COVID case in their household and they couldn't go to work, not because they were ill themselves, but because a household member wasn't. We've seen as I've said, shrinkage of certain sectors, particularly transportation. We've seen a lot of car service drivers, or bus drivers. We've seen restaurant workers, housekeepers, home health aides. In some cases, the job continues, but the person is unable to continue with it because there's been exposure or illness in the home. And in some cases, the job itself has gone away. The hotel industry is another one where we've seen a lot of layoffs. And of course, that affects the children. They benefit from having their parents home, but it creates tremendous financial hardship. And we've seen a lot of needs in that area. The other thing that's affected children is although the city has provided technology or made a commitment to provide technology to every child. The tablets don't always work. We've seen families who had to go back to the school 3 times because the item was defective, or we've seen situations where we have multiple children sharing one device, or where the internet is so unstable that you might, like, the device is useless because you don't have good internet in the household. Even if there is internet present, it may not be a stable connection. And so children repeatedly may get cut off in the middle of a class or an activity. And I think those are some of the real, sort of the quiet sufferings that are going on. We've seen children who should be getting special education services that were discontinued because they had to be conducted in person. We've also seen young people who should have been in a separate classroom, but because of COVID restrictions, they've been put in a classroom that doesn't meet their special needs. And we've heard some sort of interesting stories about how hybrid learning is happening because Department of Ed restrictions are that one teacher works with one pod of children. In high schools where classes rotate from subject area to subject area, that model doesn't work. So we have young people who go into school and sit in front of a screen and watch the teacher teach remotely, but the young person is in school. I think in many cases the teens prefer that because at least they're with their peers, but there's sometimes a feeling of why am I getting up early to come out here when my teacher is sitting at home? We've also heard, on the other hand, middle school children who are going into school and they're confined to a small group of kids, and they're not necessarily the friends that they want to be in school with. And there's some feeling of frustration that I'm with kids, but they're not the kids that I want to be with. And it feels like a tremendous loss, I think, for many of our young people. I think the other issue that we have seen is, and this was leading up to COVID and also during COVID, stigma continues to be a huge issue with young people. We've seen families that were stigmatized because there was COVID in the house and therefore there's something wrong. They must have done something irresponsible. There's a certain amount of shaming that goes on, and there's a certain amount of fear of connecting with someone where there may have been an infection, and that's affected children's classroom dynamics in some cases, or social dynamics. And leading up to COVID, it actually oddly became less evident once we were all confined to our homes, but the stigma, the association of young people, particularly young people living in public housing, with violent crime has been it's had a very toxic effect on young people who really are just trying to get on with their lives and do the right thing. I think kids feel like they're often viewed with suspicion on the street or in stores. And some of the public dialogue is very harmful to young people. It felt to me, and again, I'm a little bit shifting, that some of that was removed from children and targeted towards homeless people for a while. So kids got a little bit of a break, but it's starting to come back again a little bit, that the association of young people with criminal activity. And on the other hand, we are seeing young people involved in crime. And in some cases, it's just anger and frustration at the conditions they're living under. And in some cases, I think it is a response to some real hardship that just isn't being addressed effectively by larger social programs. So I think that's my brief picture. We are concerned with families falling behind. I know at least one of our programs, the parents said, we just don't have the educational background to be able to properly support our children. And so we've been doing daily homework help remotely with groups of kids and individuals. And I guess the other thing that we're saying is, on the one hand, we're being told that we should be providing remote group programming. And on the other hand, kids are they're zoomed out, like, don't give me any more screens. Or if I am going to do screens, let it be something on my own terms, not some adults' terms. So keeping young people engaged in a constructive way is challenging. We have tried as much as we can to create spaces where we can bring kids together to have fun, or to do activities that they can direct and that respond to their own needs. But it's been a challenging time for providers as well as for young people. The third thing that I would mention, and this came up in the context of our conversations this summer, is that New York City made a decision to eliminate all summer funding for all summer programs. And the restoration of funding, when it happened, was pretty much June 30th, which left us no time to plan. So across the city, this isn't unique to CB7, but across the city, young people were cut off from programs and trusting relationships with adults that should have been in place. And there was a cutback in terms of summer jobs, which kids really needed and households really depend on. In some cases, those relationships have not reestablished, partly because of this rupture of trust, and partly because we have found a very large number of families have had their telephones disconnected. And I think this is again because of the economic hardship. But we've had a very difficult time reconnecting, that those couple of months without contact was enough to lose touch altogether with the family when the one means of connection that we had was through the phone. So I guess that's my summary of the state of the state. We try to be hopeful about change coming and on many levels, but I'm open for any questions that anybody raise.
Susan Blanche, I have a question there.
Sure.
I might have a couple.
Mhm.
Sort of lumping what you call COVID shaming,
Mhm.
criminal activity,
Mhm.
with the whole question of mental health.
Mhm. Yeah. Depression is rampant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Anxiety, yeah.
I think I remember you're putting something in for the district need statement
Mhm.
of counseling.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you could, if
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that, Blanche. It's become so much a part of the landscape that I stopped seeing it even anymore. But we are absolutely seeing depression resulting from isolation. We're seeing quite a bit of trauma. We've really, the death rate has been very, very high among our families. And we don't know, I don't think we know a single household that hasn't lost a family member. So children are coping with loss and doing it while separated. Just the experience of the pandemic, I think, has been traumatic for all of us. I have to say, I think we're all in a state of both trauma and post-traumatic stress. And of course, you know, in the case of children, they're much more vulnerable because they don't have the reservoir of, how do I put this? People say loss is a skill that you build up over life. And it's good that when you get old, you've had your losses and you've learned to acclimate. But children don't have those skills. They haven't yet overcome hardships. They haven't learned how to lose, how to grieve. And when you get, in some cases, your people are hit repeatedly by loss. And I think children are particularly unprepared to handle that. So we are seeing tremendous mental health needs, and there's very little, there's relatively little available that's free and affordable.
Another question, you mentioned like organizations such as DOME, 53rd Street Y, Strikers Bay, and there are a couple others. We go up as far as Children's Aid.
Children's Aid we work with too.
Yeah. Do the agencies ever get together and share either resources, concerns, issues, or what?
No, that's a good question. We don't have a local network that meets regularly on youth issues. It probably would be a good thing to do. There are some citywide networks. There's one in particular, Neighborhood Family Services Coalition, that Stephen attends, that actually went from monthly meetings to weekly meetings. And I believe Children's Aid is a part of that. I don't know if Amy herself attends it, but I do feel that we've been in some ways more isolated from each other because the demands of keeping up with our immediate circles have become much greater, and the kinds of things that we're having to address. So instead of calling colleagues, I'm standing out on the street handing out sandwiches, and the whole way that we've used time shifted, even as agency members. You know, I spent last week trying to find vaccines for seniors, and that wouldn't be in the normal course of but I think it's kept us a little bit more, from my perspective, it's kept us a little more isolated from each other.
Yeah, because a few years ago, CB7 through this YEL committee started something that we call Youth Initiative. And just from plain cold calling, we got together about 12 agencies, and we met monthly. Each month, a different agency hosted, and prepared the agenda. But it gave the agencies an opportunity, number one, to meet each other for the first time
Yeah.
and to share, well, I have some extra spaces for the
Mhm.
summer program,
Mhm.
or we have a theater here,
Yeah.
I have a basketball court.
Mhm.
So they were able to do that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that initiative
Yeah.
sort of fell apart a bit, but
Mm.
something that we could think about starting up again.
I think it would be very useful, although it's one more meeting to try to squeeze into our calendars.
I know.
We've all found that our calendars, we were just saying this today, that you used to have a little bit of time in between meetings, but now you go from, 11:59 to noon to 12:59 to 1. Like somehow there's more stuff happening, but sitting in front of a screen. On the other hand, we've had to crowdsource our way through this crisis. Remember at one point calling Amy and saying, like, how are you at Children's Aid, like, what are you doing about food for your families? We've got food for seniors, but what about, when we kind of problem solved. I was grateful to have that connection because she was incredibly helpful in talking me through what she was doing, and we shared what we were doing. But I think, it's kind of like with the vaccines for seniors now, there's no system in place. It's a free for all. And so, if you have a close colleague, you can say, call this number now. They have 50 shots. Like, go get it. And I feel like that's how we've been managing through COVID as community serving entities. It's really word of mouth and who knows who. And, we've been very grateful to CB7 because a number of you have been really helpful. I know Roberta participates and Mark in some regular meetings that we've been having around senior services.
Yeah. Okay. I've been consuming time. Any other questions?
Thank you,
Okay.
Blanche. I'll go around the room a bit, and people want to raise their cyber hand, but we normally give a chance for everyone.
Mhm.
But Roberta was the first to put up her cyber hand, so she's the lucky caller number one.
Susan, I know that some of the things you're doing are not funded.
Right.
And I know the city is cutting back funds. And one of the things that we'll be working on this year are our budget priorities for next year.
Right.
And we advocate, we're not an agent, we're a city agency that doesn't really have power, but the things we can do is advocate for things. So, if we can have some kind of some information about what the agencies need vis-a-vis, where the cutbacks are, and we can start advocating with our city council members and our borough president to get some of the funds restored. I mean, we were very upset last summer with the youth employment program, which certainly could have been a big help. But and I know going forward, you're going to need extra mental health help and funds for those kinds of things. So anything we can do in that arena will be.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I think, I see that what Monica's question is about the next year's summer employment. There are some early indications that summer youth employment will be funded. We're not going to go. I think there was some lessons learned. There was an assumption made by the city last summer that remote work was impossible for young people. And in fact, I think that the agencies that run summer youth employment spectacularly proved that assumption to be wrong. There were some amazing remote projects that were set up, as well as some that were conducted safely out of doors. So I know there was some mural painting, things that people were able to do with social distancing. I know young people set up Discord channels. I don't know if people know Discord. It's a gaming conversation platform. And so kids were able to set up Discord chat rooms so that they could safely talk to the kids in their particular group without others coming in. Kids painted a mural that was within sight of the Metropolitan Correctional Facility, so prisoners could see something hopeful when they looked out. And apparently the prisoners and the kids were waving to each other as they were painting. It was people did some outdoor gardening projects, farm stands. So I think the city learned from us that this was doable, and that will affect the funding decisions going forward. But I would say that the thing we most need help with is we can work with reduced budgets, but we cannot work with young people if there's a total cutoff. So this idea of we're not going to do summer programming because kids should be inside was absolutely devastating and impossible to build back. Devastating also for staff who were unemployed for the summer. And then sort of getting a last minute, okay, you can take kids with, but now, we've already laid off staff that, it was just horrible. So I would say even the principle of continuous funding would be really important, even separate from the amounts in the budgets. Just keep us running continuously, because you can't keep laying people off in the middle of a pandemic and then bringing them back. And you also can't maintain relationships with children and families, because when you come back 2 or 3 months later, they're not necessarily reachable, especially in the middle of a pandemic.
So Bev and Stephen and I will work with you on that.
Yes, yeah, we'll be happy to give specifics too as we go.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roberta.
Mhm.
Doug, I saw your hand up.
It was more a comment, and I think Roberta's got a plan for how we could help. But I just wanted Susan to thank you for your comments today. They hit home with me. COVID, but more importantly, policy decisions and responses to COVID have negatively impacted my family, my young family. One of my children is a kindergartner full-time Zoom. Youngest is in pre-K. I'm also a combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan who deals with post-traumatic stress. In my community, we call it post-traumatic strength. We find strength
I like that.
in the
I like
trauma.
that.
It's not a disorder. It's it's something that you use to make yourself better. We've had to make difficult decisions. My wife has had to give up her job to participate with my kindergartner in Zoom classes because kindergartners aren't able, or at least mine is not able to focus when she's sitting at a computer, but yet we want to have her get her education. So we figured out how to do it at cost, and it's been difficult. And all I can say is other kids who may not have parents who are capable of responding or able to respond must be having it extremely difficult right now. I know some of them, you obviously do as well. So anything we can do to support this community, particularly as this extends for a considerable amount of time forward, is something that I would fully support. And I guess really the question, Stephen, is to you and Blanche: are we contemplating a support of some type for these activities? Is there a suggested way that we could participate, or what's the level of support we could give?
Well, I didn't, our initial thoughts were we wouldn't come out of a resolution here. It doesn't mean that we couldn't rethink that. You should know that we advocated for these programs in our DNS, and we, at YEL, we took a very focused approach. So we only made 2 or 3, and one of them was baseline. We wanted to acknowledge the reality. So ours was not, we felt the realistic request to baseline these programs, and the majority, the Beacon, Summer Youth, all of those are in our DNS. If we felt like we wanted to write a letter because it's in there, we can do so. But I think we've been very verbal. I can tell you we had a meeting with Helen Rosenthal about 30 days ago, and we were talking about a couple different initiatives. One was around the devices, which I just every time someone talks about youth, they talk about devices, and I'm gonna figure out a way to help out with that. But I specifically brought as a point is, what are the things that are important for youth? And we said, we need to keep the summer youth programs minimum baseline, and we want you to advocate for that. And she said, very good point. So we have advocated multiple points. I feel like we've done enough. If everyone at the end of this wants us to write a letter, but I feel like it may be more prudent, Doug, to wait a little bit longer down the line when, I don't know, I hate to say it, when we hear bad news, or something like that, it's kind of, we're speaking into a vacuum right now, but Susan should know, and everyone should know that we have been extreme, heavy advocates of all of the programs she spoke, and will continue to do so. And I think probably our best case is to continue to do what we're doing, and then be ready to act when maybe the timing is, I'm not going to say more appropriate, because it's all appropriate, but more timely, should we say.
Yeah, thank you.
Doug, let me just answer your question. Your direct question was, what would YEL in a sense be doing? If that was your question going forward, I would just say, since Stephen has been elevated or is elevated, the committee YEL will undoubtedly be reshaping in a sense, but also we would have the opportunity for someone like you, and I'm sure other members of YEL, to come forward with other ideas or additional ideas of what we might be doing going forward. Steve has generously said he will be with us. I know we're hard to let go of. That's just the YEL thing. But at some point, we will have to plumb the talents of our YEL committee a little bit more deeply. And I am taking your question as volunteering to come up. That's the big mistake you make with me. I'll just warn you. If you come up with a thought, I regard it as your volunteer. So there will be ample opportunity, and I do hope you'll continue your interest. And we will get the committee shaped, reshaped, and whatever. Okay. But thank you for your thoughts and your interest. I didn't know you were a Iraqi vet.
Yeah, and Doug,
And Afghanistan.
Oh, good to know.
and Doug, thank you for that, and thank you also for post-traumatic
Yes.
strengths. I will remember that.
So Susan, to that point, for the community who will or does suffer from post-traumatic stress, there is a ton of literature and experience in the veteran community on how to address that. It is not there are a number of organizations, as we know, that it's not a end state, it's a part of who you are.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're aware of it, but you brought up the term. I think it's the appropriate term, because clearly there's been a traumatic event that's taken place here in the city.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for
Any
that.
other comment?
I would say thanks for volunteering, but
Oh, for being volunteered. Okay. Any other comments?
I was gonna, Blanche, if you like, just because I see all the
Oh,
cyber.
you're
hate
going
and
around the
everything,
table. Oh, you're seeing the gizmo. Okay.
I got the gizmo in front of me.
Okay.
So we have a long history rewarding the note taker with one of the first questions. So I'm going to offer Mark, and then I see a bunch of hands. Tasha, Courtney, Rosa, Bev, got you all. We're going to go right down the list. But,
oh, great. Okay.
Mark earns his early question because he's taking those notes.
As I'm looking, it may look like I'm not looking at the meeting, but that's because I'm looking at the other computer to take the notes. So forgive what may appear to be a rudeness. It's not.
You're drifting.
I guess the I guess the thing that I would want to follow up on is the various learning to work opportunities and how they relate to which of our vulnerable populations they target and what kind of success do we have with that. And again, quite apart from our with the mayor standing by his phone waiting to hear from CB7 as to how the budget should be organized. We also have the opportunity to promote things in a messaging kind of way, sometimes with greater effect than others, but sometimes important to keep that going. So I guess the two things that I'm most interested in are to pick up on, and I don't know what to do with it, but to pick up on what you said, which or what I understood you to say, which I've also heard from our colleague Amy, about even more devastating than a budget cut is uncertainty. And that can be uncertainty as to whether you're going to have a program over the summer, or last summer's, because remember 4 or 5 years ago, there were baseline summer programs, and then in between the preliminary budget and the executive budget, they went away, and then the council restored them. God bless the council. But in the meantime, people were unable to plan then. And then the example you offered this summer of believing until July 1st that there wasn't going to be a program, and then being tasked with coming up with one. So both in terms of messaging and in terms of budget advocacy, just a bit more about who we're talking about and how to put that into an effective message. That would be helpful to understand. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and I want to thank you specifically for the reference to Learning to Work, because that program actually was cut 25% this year. And we were faced, somebody somewhere leaked out to us the fact that Department of Ed had been planning to cut it 100% as of November. And we were able to save that program, even with a substantial cut. It's the Learning to Work piece that we do is in the partnership with the school, we embed counsel. The Learning to Work, the program that's called Learning to Work is focused on students who have dropped out of high school or who have somehow disconnected from school. It's what's called a transfer school model, meaning you can't go directly into Edward Reynolds High School. You have to transfer from another school. And really, and appreciating very much Doug's strength-based approach, the philosophy of the program is the kids didn't fail the school failed the kid. And I've worked with Learning to Work in my previous job from when the program was founded in 2005, and we were still trying to define the model. But a lot of the young people come into these smaller high schools. They're small personalized settings. Each young person is assigned an individual called a primary person. It may be a teacher, it may be a counselor who actually knows the kid. But a lot of the kids come in and say, no one in my high school ever bothered to learn my name, and I was there for 3 years. I was in some of the larger high schools where somebody came in, got screamed at for walking to the office and said, I'm just here to return a book that I had for the summer. So I think the idea is it's called Learning to Work because that kind of resonated with Mayor Bloomberg, and it started in his administration. And young people do learn to work. They career exploration of various types is part of the program. And actually one way Community Board could help us is we're always looking for community settings, programs that might be willing. We haven't been able to do it under pandemic conditions because everything has to be remote, but when we're back to normal at some point, we're always looking for sites. We pay the young person, they work at your site. And it gives people a chance to say, gee, I want to work with 2-year-olds. No, after doing it for 3 months, I really hate 2-year-olds. I think I want to be back working with adults. But it gives kids a chance to experiment and find out what they really love. And we've seen some amazing successes over the years with kids who had disengaged from everything, who learn through work that showing up is important, and then carry that over into school and successfully graduate, go on to college, etc. And I think I have in my passion for Learning to Work lost the second part of your question, Mark, there was a second part to it.
No, you pretty much got it. I mean, it was the messaging and then the uncertainty about the budget stuff, but I think you've covered that. I just wanted to emphasize that whatever it is that we can be doing, and I agree completely with Stephen that we would be more effective in making that case when the executive budget is coming out as opposed to in the middle of January. So thanks for that. One thing that I'll just mention is that I don't know if they still do it, but the West Side Y had a program whose name, of course, I can't now remember, but CV7 gave them an award for it a bunch of years ago, where among other things, they also taught kids how to dress for work.
Yeah, we do that too. Yes.
Yeah, that's such an important thing because boy, you're judged the minute you walk in the door. And if you're not, if nobody bothered to tell you that in school, and I don't think schools do that anymore, probably for civil rights reasons, that you could end up unsuccessful before you opened your mouth. Anyway, God bless.
We actually used to keep like ties and things in the office for the boys, and definitely coaching on appropriate workforce attire is definitely part of everybody's education. We do workshops on work, and even in our other teen programs, there's some conversation about how you project yourself out in the world and how you the importance of appearance. The other thing I just wanted to mention that happens when we discontinue programs, and I remember a young person saying this in a hearing, he dropped the prepared remarks that we had spent hours working with him on, and he just looked at the city council and said, how do you expect us to respect you as the government when you don't respect us because you keep cutting our programs? And I think that message, yeah, he was a very respectful kid actually, but it's an implicit message to young people that you just don't count and you're disposable.
Thanks. I won't hog the ball.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna go, I think the order we established was Natasha, Courtney, Rosa, Bev in order. Natasha?
Hi, thank you, Susan, for being here tonight, and thank you for everything that you and your organization are doing. You know, I had a question. It's more almost like a philosophical question about teen crime. And I know you mentioned it briefly, saying that, you know, there are kids who are just going out there trying to get on with their lives, and they're, you know, looked on with suspicion, like why is this kid not in school? What's he doing here? You know, is he not up to some good? But then there are incidents like recently, you know, the knife point robberies in the 70s. You know, they were conducted by 14 and 16-year-olds. The murder, like about 18 months ago, or whenever that was, of the Barnard student, you know, again, very young people. And, you know, it really kind of, you know, I wonder what it is that we as a society could be doing differently to prevent that from happening in the first place. Like, you know, you're 14, 16, you know, your life is over, you know, if something like that happens. And how does somebody get to that point? And it seems like, and I don't know if it's true or not, but to me, it seems like more of that is happening during the pandemic, maybe because, like you said, of the financial stress that, you know, families are going through, or maybe kids just aren't in school. They have just too much time on their hands. What's your opinion about it? What's been your experience?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I don't know any of the young people involved, so I couldn't comment on what led to those specific circumstances. I do know that no one ever sees a headline that says middle-aged man murdered so and so, whereas most of the violent crime is committed by adults, not teens. But I think it so shocks us at our core when a child commits something violent that it becomes headline making in a way that other kinds of violence don't. I do know that there was a study back in the 90s that actually started with looking at mass shootings. It started with Columbine, and the findings of the CDC at the time was that the major driver of youth violence was family violence. And we don't have good systematic ways of addressing the absolute epidemic of family violence, you know, particularly spousal violence. But violence is generally learned behavior. The first place where people learn that is in the home. And, you know, I have to say, even Goddard Riverside, with our rich array of 27 programs, we don't have anything that explicitly addresses domestic violence. We do have an outstanding sister organization, Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, which we work with somewhat, but it's, I think that's probably where it starts. And we're a violent society. I mean, we've witnessed this in a very open way, but it's in many ways rooted in American culture that we solve problems through violence. You know, we watch Westerns. You know, we glorify. It's a way of solving problems that has some legitimacy, I think, in our culture. There's cross-cutting trends. I mean, we're also a very gentle, nurturing culture in other ways, so I shouldn't generalize in that way. But it's hard for me to say what happened with those particular cases, not knowing more. But somebody does have to be at a very extreme point to go to the point of taking a life. There is definitely one of the interesting studies about the summer youth employment program was that employment, we expected, there was a longitudinal study done in Chicago, and what we expected to find was that the outcome of summer youth employment was jobs, employment history. There was no difference between the summer youth employment group and the employed group in terms of long-term employment, but where there was a difference was involvement in crime. And having the opportunity and the structure and the support of a job actually had a significant impact on later arrest rates and conviction rates among young people. So I think we have to think holistically when we look at youth violence. We have to, some of the other factors that we know drive young people to violence is feeling hopeless, feeling like my life is going to end anyway. So, I might as well take risks. Because when your life is, as you say, your life is over and you're a teenager. If you feel like your life isn't going anywhere anyway, you don't value it and you don't treasure it in the same way. So giving people opportunities and a sense of purpose is what it really takes to begin, but also the support and the connection for people to be able to, for young people to be able to move in positive directions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
Mm-hmm.
Courtney?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for being here. This is really helpful. A couple of things. One is a comment. I feel like your comments here have just really underlined and bolded for me the ongoing problem and need for devices, Wi-Fi, and counseling. We keep hearing that over and over, but we really, I think as a community, need to focus on that and not lose that thread and see if there's anything we can do, because we keep hearing that over and over. And I just I think we need to really kind of drill down on that. On that list of the programs that you spoke to at the top, I'm going to email you. If we could get a list of those, that would be wonderful, because there were several on those of which I was not aware. And then my third is the actual question, which is, I was really interested in your discussion about the opportunities for kind of private partnerships. And this is more of a, don't have to answer right now, but if I think we should have a conversation, and I think it's really interesting if there are other opportunities or ideas for kind of to seek out those private partnerships where you think it would be helpful. I think that's a really interesting idea. And I think anything we can do to give people some way to help on this would be great, because that's a lot of need you just went through there. And a lot of really important.
Susan, before you answer, God in Riverside has one of the best websites of any of the organizations I know, and all of their wonderful things are on the website. So you might take a look at the website.
Thank you, Roberta.
I just typed the address into the chat. So thank you.
I copied it. Thank you.
And I've also put my email in the chat, so you can also feel free to correspond afterwards if there's something left unanswered or you think of something tomorrow. Yeah, so it's hard for me to say generally this is the kind of partnerships that that work, because partnerships are like any other relationship. They're kind of organic. There has to be a chemistry and a mutual interest. Certainly for learning to work, we're always looking for work sites. We've had a need for food. We have a need for donations. Many of you have partnered with us around our holiday meals, which is, provides a need. We do have a direct relief fund. We're kind of at the bottom of it. We're welcoming any kind of support for that. That's a very concrete support. We've been able to provide some emergency food and rent and utility assistance. The issue with the internet is there's a digital divide. There are some proposals out there which we would welcome support for inexpensive or free broadband access. I think there's a state proposal I think it's sponsored by Senator Parker, to provide for low-income families to be able to have low-income internet access, because it's no longer a luxury, it's become a necessity. And there have been some proposals, there are some actual NYCHA developments that have been fully wired so that everybody has broadband, and it's like your electricity, you just get it as part of your apartment. So I know those are a couple of policy areas where we could really use some support. And, you know, I'd happily continue, you know, in a more sort of narrowly focused way, some other partnerships, ideas that would be useful.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah,
Rosa.
thank you.
Hello, Rosa. How are you?
How are you? Thank you for all the information. This is really great. I'm going to look at the website. I have a ton of questions, but I'll stick to one or two. To follow on Courtney's thoughts about devices, is there any use to used devices? I mean, I feel like I can reach out to all of my friends and we can come up with 20, not very badly used, but you know,
Sure.
something that someone could work with. Is that of
Yes,
any value?
I would absolutely. I mean, I think we could work out, if devices are workable and they were wiped, because I don't want to give a device to somebody that has people's information, but if you have capacity to wipe it, our administrative office at 593 Columbus is open all the time. I'll put that in the chat too. I think if they're dropped off, and you could drop them to my attention.
Okay, great.
We'll make sure, because we are getting a lot of families that are just so frustrated with these devices. I think.
Like, I mean, I have 2 or 3 at home that I can part with myself,
Yes.
and I know I can probably reach out to a good 10 to
I
20.
think that would be a really terrific way to just put our.
Susan, should we put something on our website about it?
Let me double check just with the staff at 593, because they'll freak out if we start getting hundreds of people coming in the door and they have to screen them for COVID, and I don't want to freak out our poor receptionist. But, you know, for those on the call here, I think ideally if we had somebody who could gather, you know, like Rosa, gathering up a bunch from your friends and dropping off a bunch of them, that would be great. 100 people coming in with a single iPad might put our receptionist at risk. So,
I mean, that's something I can definitely work on.
but yeah, if somebody was willing to gather them up, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And we will get them into hands tomorrow, because I've got a list of people who have asked for devices that I can't honor at this point.
I'll get on it.
I think we bought about 100 devices just last spring. Yeah,
Okay,
so thank you.
I'll get on it. Okay,
Great. Thank you. Thank you. We like that kind of question. Actually, we like all your questions.
Was there another question, Rosa, or great?
I had a few more. I mean, the only thing that I remember right now is because I'm 46 and my mom passed away 2 years ago. And grief counseling was so helpful.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if that's something you offer. I mean, I know you're, again, to follow Courtney, that's one of the things you keep saying you need, but I found grief counseling to be the most helpful thing, even at my age. So I can only imagine if you're losing a parent at 14, I mean, it's got to be really hard. So I just, that's another question, but that's it.
No, it is unfortunately not something that we're able to offer, except we can refer, but we don't offer it ourselves. It's a gap. Yeah.
Thank
you. Thank you for sharing that.
Susan, I'd love to follow up offline about these devices, because one of the things that we've had is we've tried to put together a couple programs or ideas to give the devices to schools, and the DOE won't take them. Because Rosa brings up a point, but I've had numerous people ask me, I have multiple devices, I can get devices, and there's nowhere to give them.
Oh, we'll take them. We'll take them.
So
send them our way. We'll figure it out. Yeah.
There may be a way to make this a little bit bigger than 5 or 6 or 3 or 4, and
absolutely,
because I need to find a conduit to somebody, and maybe if you even promote it on both sides, you may have a list of 10, but if there's a way for you to be the middle person to sort of get this in the hands of kids that need it, sometimes you have to work around the system.
We could absolutely do that. Yeah, we've been running end runs around the system for the last year. So yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Well, I want to keep going, but I definitely would like to do a follow-up call and sort of think that through.
That would be fantastic. Thanks.
Great. Bev, you're up next.
Yes, I've for a long time been a great admirer of your college access work. I used to be at New Visions for Public Schools, and we sponsored a lot of the counselors from the schools we worked with go to the options program. I guess I'm interested in what this last cycle has been like for seniors in high school who have had their lives totally disrupted. And what you have seen in that, I assume that for most, the college application process is about done.
Yeah.
But what that has been like, I saw an article, I think it was in Chalkbeat recently, about how the city is claiming its graduation rate and its college readiness rate have both gone up. I find that a little bit hard to fathom, except that I do know that many high school students have been exempted from Regents exams, which probably helped. So I just love to hear about the experience you've had over this terrible last year in terms of college access for seniors who, and whether or not there's been a fall off in applications that you see.
Yeah,
among
no, thank
students
you,
who've made the
Bev.
decision not to go.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a huge fan of New Visions. They've been hugely supportive to my programs over the years. We have seen a tremendous fall off and so many obstacles to applying. You know, we've always done our work face to face, and that was one of our programs that actually has continued to stay remote. There definitely, I think in our cohort, there wasn't a fall off only because that's our cohort, right? The young people who come to us are college ready. We don't usually work with a general population. We work with a self-selected group that just don't know how to navigate the systems. So I don't think our own cohort saw a fall off. We did see fall off in because we have College Success, where we support young people once they get to college. It was a hugely challenging year. I mean, the kids at Oswego, I think it was, who had to go home suddenly on no notice. For some of those kids, they were coming home and they were homeless because they had counted on living at school for the year and they didn't even have a place to come home to. You know, for a lot of young people, when college ended, so did their food. So it's been a really, really difficult year. You know, a lot of our kids had jobs at the colleges. So when college went remote, they also lost their source of income. So I think I've been much more aware of the hardship of kids who had already enrolled than the kids who were getting into college. College admissions has been easier this year because CUNY enrollment citywide is down. The standards for enrollment have been a little bit lower. So this is actually a great year if somebody wants to go back to college. This is the year to do it. You could probably even apply today for next week. And that has been a change that we've seen because CUNY itself is in so much crisis and so many kids were not able to access it. So I think the experience of our options program is not the normative experience of the average kid in high school, because what we provide is what they lost when school went remote. You know, our kids had the navigational assistance. I guess it was fortunate for last year's class that the pandemic hit in the spring when applications were already in. For this year, I think for kids trying to apply remotely, it's been really, really difficult. And CUNY has tried to make its own system a little bit more navigable, but it's been hugely challenging, I think, particularly for the current year's class. And, you know, the other grade I just wanted to comment on that's been I think it's been really, for seniors, it was really hard, you know, just emotionally not being able to say goodbye and have all those rituals. And even though we had graduations in the street and everything, it wasn't the same. But I think for what we're seeing for ninth graders transitioning from middle school into high school, this is really impossible. And you know, you don't want to even turn your screen on because you're with a group of strangers. Ninth grade is such a tough transition as it is, but trying to do a transition into high school remotely has been just a nightmare. And that's the class I think I worry the most about of all of the groups that we're working with, the kids transitioning into middle school, and especially the kids transitioning into high school, where an assumption has been made they don't need to be in person, but the ninth graders really do, because they're teenagers transferring into a whole new community where they know nobody. And I think a lot of kids are disconnecting before they even engage. And that's been a big issue. Yeah.
Thanks, Bev. I know that I have some questions and I know Doug has some questions, but I'm going to make a pause here because I know Kim Watkins is here and I think she's got a time issue and I want to make sure we give her a little time to speak. And since we're speaking about freshmen and seniors, that's sort of a good youth and education combination.
Yes.
So
hi, Kim.
Hi, Kim. How are you? Thank you for coming. And, you know, any thoughts about these topics that we're talking about? If anyone doesn't know, Kim is our head of our CEC, which is a very, very good organization that leads us in education.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everybody. So nice to be here. Thank you for accommodating me, and I apologize that I have to be so brief tonight. The Susan's remarks are really just hit the nail on the head. The difficulties that our students are having in transitional years, with applications, with anxiety over tests, and grading, and fluctuations in terms of going into school, not going into school. It is an extraordinary period of time for our school system, and I don't think we could begin to undercut the significance of the trauma that's been inflicted on the kids, and the teachers and the nurses and our principals. They're all working really hard, and District 3, which covers CV7 and goes up into 122nd Street, as you know, is certainly one of the luckiest districts, just in that we have great staff, we have great principals, we have a great superintendent, we have our great CEC, and you guys, and CB10. But the struggle is real, and the DOE is hyper political in almost everything that it does. And so we're finding with every little thing, just regardless of whether you're on one side of an issue or another or whatever, the fact that we get information Friday night at 4:00, that principals find out what's happening in their schools via tweets and the media. I mean, I think we remember that somebody was governing this way in our nation's capital. But honestly, this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with, because the Department of Education doesn't have a lot of political courage, where the mayor doesn't, and we're not getting good communication from our from the bureaucracy. So having said that, the big things right now, obviously, are what Susan was talking about, those transitional years, and obviously right now with admissions open for this coming fall, everything having sort of been pushed and pushed and pushed into the spring, this winter and spring. We have a wide array of complications, from the issue of middle schoolers not going to school because it's not safe, but yet being told to go to school to take the Shazat. Right. So there's one aspect. We have the general, confusion around the admissions cycle for high school, and how the lack of priorities for districts will interplay with the rest of the metrics. And then having said that too, because screens were not eliminated for high school admissions, what do those rubrics all look like? Because schools invent their own rubrics, and there are lots of different variations on that, and it's not so easily kind of navigated if you're a parent and or going through that as a student. So high school students, eighth graders are going through that right now, and then in the fifth grade, with middle school admissions and the removal of screens completely for District 3, what it means is that the lottery, sort of the ranking on the student side, coupled with the lottery, is presenting obvious fears and concerns with some parents. It is unavoidable. I mean, this is happening. We're not going back. This is happening next year. So we've just got to figure out a way to make sure that we're communicating all the options to parents, helping them understand how the algorithm works. There is actually a DOE session going on right now to explain how the lottery system works for middle school students. And District 3's superintendent and our middle school committee from CEC has done a really great job getting prospective students and middle school principals together, lots of open houses, virtual open houses, and as much information going back and forth as possible. The last thing that I'll say has to do with gifted and talented, because the news that the mayor announced last week, without any additional detail, because that's what he does, was really frustrating for our district, because we have so many GNT programs in it. And it left open this really huge question that we're now facing in our district that it is something you guys should be thinking about, and that has to do with this year. So this year is going to happen, presumably, as usual. There'll be a class that goes in this coming fall. But if this is the last year the test is administered, and then we're not, what are we doing? We don't know what we're doing because they've said nothing about it. So if there's no test and there are no GNT programs for kindergarten admission, then we need like right now to start talking about a rezoning so that our schools have space, have the number of kids in the building that are appropriate for the size of their zones. And PS 166, 163, 165, and of course Anderson has no zone at all. So we don't really know what those kindergarten classes might look like for 2022. So that's a big deal because the regulation for the admissions for changes to zone lines, it's Chancellor's Reg A185, I think, or something 185. It mandates like an 18-month pre-engagement period. So we should be talking about it right now, but no one has any idea what the DOE is up to.
Thanks,
So
Kim.
I'll stop there. That's kind of my overview. I want to make sure you guys know about that.
No, that's very helpful. A couple points. I mean, I think we should, as we end our meetings with sort of ideas, and I think coming back with the G&T program is definitely maybe something we want to talk about. And what people have to understand, the nuance of what Kim's saying is, regardless how you feel for the program, and there's people on both sides, but if you got to act on it, and our what we've seen is a history of sort of making a statement and doing nothing when things need to be done. And as a parent of a freshman, so I hear this. I talk about the infamous Friday night at 9 p.m. that there's no school Monday, and we'll let you know in 2 weeks why. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to deal with, and whatever we can do to push and just at least say, you got to do something about these things. But it is, regardless of how you feel, they can't just cancel something and then do nothing. It's just you can't do it. But they have. I'm gonna keep going, Courtney. I see you, but Doug was next. I actually have a couple questions. Did you have a quick question for Kim though that you wanted to ask? Because I know you helped speak. So Doug, if we don't mind holding.
Yeah, I do have one quick question for Kim, and then I know she needs to run. This issue around whether or not the per pupil funding reimbursements that I read about, that the DOE was going to schools and telling the schools that they basically owed money back based on lower student attendance numbers. Have you heard anything about that? And is that going to affect schools in our district?
Well, we do have a lot of schools with enrollments that are far lower than what they planned.
Yeah.
So technically, yes, but I've been told that there have been no demands for cash, as of right now. I mean, it's such a strange concept to me that they would even go in that
But they
direction.
haven't. But no. They haven't received any letters because that.
I don't believe so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll go to Doug, and I also want to encourage any attendees who want to ask questions, feel free to raise your hand. Peter, we promoted, so we're going to get you in shortly, but we're going to continue to ask questions, and I see Julian as well. So let's go to Doug, and then we'll go to Julian. And I think most of the people spoke, but if they on our committee, but if somebody else wants to speak, make sure you hit the cyber hand, and then we'll go to some attendees. So Doug, thank you for being here.
Sure. No, this is really just validating and repeating some things that were already spoken about. And I just wanted to add an extra sense of frustration. I can't believe that we still have problems with the lack of devices and the internet service providers. And I would love to find out if there is any, I know Susan mentioned some possible pending legislation. We have in our district an extremely wealthy neighborhood in many parts of it anyway. And we also have the internet service providers that are licensed in our communities, and namely the household names of Verizon and Spectrum and these massive companies that, by the way, have been doing quite well with the pandemic. So this is just me spitballing an idea, which is that I know that in certain entitlements, when someone qualifies for certain programs under Medicaid and Medicare, SNAP benefits, EBT, they automatically get put into other programs to get approved, right? So if someone is approved under Medicaid, they automatically, approve. I just wonder if there's any way to do something like that, where if someone is qualified in certain income and need, that immediately they qualify for low cost internet service providers, and also on the devices, these massive companies, the Dells, the Best Buys, the Amazons. Radio Shack is back in business, believe it or not. So, I would offer my support. It just seems to me that if they're licensed, I'm not sure if Spectrum and Verizon are state licensed or federally or all of the above, but perhaps there's leverage with them. You've got your state licensing, or it's compensated by the state and it's mandated. So I just want to say, I just can't believe that in our community we don't have enough devices and we don't have the internet. It's just so frustrating.
Yeah, Linda Rosenthal had some type of bill or some type of thing she was promoting with Verizon. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I continue to be in awe that we can't figure this out.
If we can find out what bill it is, pass a resolution possibly to support it.
Yeah.
She sent it over.
So Linda is now chair of the Social Services Committee of the Assembly, which puts her in a very strong position to advocate for some of these things. I actually think it's really, we're as a community very well positioned to float some of these ideas. And I think that's a great one. I mean, to make it, you could do tax offsets. There's any number of things. Half of my bill seems to be fees and taxes. So, it seems like there should be some way that could be instituted.
Erica Overton's on our call.
Yeah, we got to see Erica as one.
Oh, I didn't see her. Hi, Erica.
No.
Yep.
Maybe we can promote her in a bit. Let's offer Peter. Peter had his hand, had some things that he wanted to talk about, and then we'll jump back to Julian. But Peter, we promoted you. Did you want to? I saw a couple of posts in the chat.
Sure. I came in late, Susan. Sorry. I'm with the Business Improvement District north of 96th Street. We were just doing a history talk with Trinity Lutheran, and it came out that their shelter for kids that have been pushed out of their house, generally for sexual reasons, is threatened by the Department of Buildings. And I just wanted to call that to the committee's attention, because this has been a long-standing respite place for a group of kids that ranges, it's like a dozen kids that have been there in many cases for over months. Because of the pandemic, it's been extended. But now they've got Department of Buildings leaning on them, and Department of Buildings has cited them with a violation for not following their certificate of occupancy. So just wanted to bring that to the committees and the community board's attention.
Peter, I see that Cindy Cardinal from Helen Rosenthal's office is on the call, so maybe she could be helpful tomorrow.
I don't know, but I can only hope so. I just know that this has been a lifesaver for lots of young people, and now all of a sudden it's being threatened.
Yeah, that's, by the way, Pastor Heidi's shelter, which is for LGBTQ youth primarily. It's in Mark Levine's district, though. So, so maybe Cindy.
Council reps can be helpful.
Absolutely, right thought. Just different council member
and borough president.
Yes, indeed.
And Peter, if there's any way we as Goddard can be supportive, that's a terrible need. This is the worst time to put kids out on the street. And I know that the Department of Buildings has ways to make exceptions. There's letters of no objection and whatever. So that's, if there's any way we can be helpful, we'd be happy.
That might be really helpful to mention. It's good to hear that. I have not had good experience with Department of Buildings or the Department of Homeless Services. So
no one, Peter, nobody has.
well, okay. I wish it was otherwise, but okay. Anyway, thanks. And
Peter,
I'll
can we
mention
talk
that.
tomorrow?
I'm sorry?
It's Roberta. Can we talk tomorrow?
Yes. Do you have my cell number?
I do. I'll call you in the morning.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah. And if other people have ideas, I mean, you can send emails, or Roberta or Mark, or maybe Stephen has my cell number.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Real good. Thank you all.
Thanks. I'm just going to ask, I did promote Erica, and I saw that you wrote a little bit in the chat, but if you want to unmute yourself and just talk a little bit about Linda's Verizon bill or any update, that would be great for the group.
Hey everyone, it's me. So I do not know what Verizon bill we are talking about, but I just texted her legislative aide to fill me in, and so I will send everything to you either tonight or tomorrow morning. We did write, she did write a letter to Verizon and Charter, and I'm blanking on the other. One of the other big tech companies to give free Wi-Fi. And I think that was like, Mark, I think that was like the beginning of the school year when we had sent that.
Yeah, just to be corrected, maybe it was a letter. I apologize.
Maybe it was, okay. I was like, oh no, I cannot remember a Verizon bill, but you know, that's what it'd be.
Maybe I meant a Verizon letter, but I definitely thought that I read it.
I will still check on the Verizon bill because there are many bills, and who knows. So I will check on that for you too.
But I saw a letter or some type of request, so.
Yeah, and so the letter was asking for free Wi-Fi for a period of time, and we talked to a lot of NYCHA residents, as well as the NYCHA president, Margarita, who that was one of and Susan, and Wi-Fi was one of the biggest issues, and as well as devices. The response from Verizon, I don't know if this is public, but I guess there is some type of RFP process going on right now with the city that Verizon will probably be outfitting NYCHA. Do not quote me on that because that was like seems like they are in discussions on that. But that was one of the responses we got back to the letter. And so they asked us to, they're having conversations and they'll fill us in. But I will also check on a bill because it's very possible. And then I'll get back to you guys. But yeah, she is just been promoted to chair of social services. And so she's meeting with different commissioners to discuss, all the issues we've seen throughout the years. And now that, she actually has a real chance to elevate these issues and, make a change in the assembly. We are very, very thrilled. And we're very excited to work with Susan because for so long, for as long as I've been here, for 8 years, it's been, we've had lots of discussions on, all the things we wanted to change and all the advocacy that was done around it. And so hopefully now that she is the chair, we can really push forward. But we also love to meet with you guys if, if Linda can, to, talk as a committee on what you want to see her do as well. Now that she has this bully pulpit.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we end every kind of meeting with ideas, so maybe that's an opportunity to think about for next month's meeting, and we could follow up with you.
Sure. Just let me know.
Thank you. Julian has been very patient, so Julian's up. I see Ira, your hand up as well now, but it's Julian's turn because he's let me skip him twice, so go get him.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm unfortunately going to have to leave in a few minutes, so I'll be brief. I just can't say how thankful I am for your presentation. I'm involved in a lot of youth voice efforts across the city, and it's great to have an adult who understands what youth are experiencing and is doing amazing work. So I'm really appreciative. I guess the few comments I had is, I'm one youth out of 50 adult members on the community board, and I would love to see more diverse youth representation on the board. Yes. And maybe one request, I know community board applications are due February 1st, actually, and they're open to youth 16 years and older. So if it would be possible, maybe we could share resources about those applications and you could convey that. Yeah, I think that'd be really, yeah. Involving more youth would be really amazing for this board. And I guess the only two things I have to mention for the board in particular, I guess, is I think there's a lot of great, schools are it's a difficult situation for schools to provide, especially mental health support for students now. And I know different schools have been doing it in different ways. Like my school hasn't been doing a good job of that, but I know there's other schools that have really strong, restorative justice community building programs,
Yeah.
that are really active, and that can really make a difference. And I think as we sort of stabilize halfway through the year, I think schools can start implementing these programs now. And I think I definitely think maybe in our role as a committee, we can advocate for work that schools can do. So it's not, and at the same time, I'm mindful that like last year we were really struggling because of the lack of funding for summer programs and the lack of, there was a lot of time deadline issues where we passed a resolution and it was just too late. And I know now we have some time in advance. So if there's any resolutions or efforts that we can do now that will help for the summer, I really want to make sure that we get on that as soon as possible. Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks for your leadership and your representation, Julian. It's really important to have young people at the community boards. And that's something that we fought for. That was a victory by young people across the city. So thank you.
Well, Julian may be the youngest by age, but I think maturity may be up there. So if you get this together, it's a different sort of groupings. We're gonna go to Ira. I just did want to say there's still about a half dozen people in the attendees. Please raise your hand, and if you can't figure out how to do that, you can also you can message me in the chat that you want to speak, and then I can promote you. So I want to make sure everyone else gets a chance to speak. So Ira, you are up, sir.
Unmute. I botched that last night too. Okay, so two things. One is I just want to talk a little bit about Verizon, Spectrum, Con Ed. They all operate on franchise agreements with the city, and they pay the city substantial fees for that. Verizon just recently made a settlement with the city that they were supposed to have the whole city wired up for broadband, which they haven't done. And they just recently agreed to do some areas which they've completely refused to do because it wasn't profitable. Even within our neighborhood, there are pockets that Verizon has not wired because they've decided that it's not profitable for them. I actually happen to live in one of those pockets. So I would suspect that any area that has a large number of smallish walk-up buildings or walk-up buildings that are isolated from big buildings, Verizon may not be wiring those up, which leaves you with the limited option of Spectrum. So that's a problem probably in the north, particularly in the northeast quadrant of CB7, where there are a lot of these small walk-up buildings, and probably in the central part where we also have a lot of these small walk-up buildings. I don't know if Verizon is what their approach is, but if they're not dealing with that, even if you kind of deal with Spectrum, that doesn't necessarily help us. Spectrum's a little bit better because they're also the cable provider. But cable is also not exactly a cheap option either. But once again, given the fact that I've had this problem with Con Ed in my professional work, they're very reluctant to do anything that, is not economic for them. In terms of what Kim said about the schools, there are a number of schools in the district, in the central and lower part of the district, that are down about 100 students right now this year. And that's the real number in there. And even within that 100, that's who just simply did not return. There are probably about at least another 100 in these schools that are fully remote, both physically and in school, and whether they actually come back next year is another question. I see a lot of people, at a PTA meeting, I see a lot of people that seem to be living in farmhouses or alike. So whether all these people come back or not, we may have a real surplus next year, which is going to cause all sorts of other problems, which we really haven't discussed, and the numbers really haven't been put on the table. It may also make the whole argument of middle school a mute discussion. The last thing is, I was the PTA president at PS9 anywhere from 7 to 10 years ago when we discontinued our G&T program. And I would say when Kim was, and unfortunately she's not on the phone now, we went from two sections of G&T and 2 sections of Gen Ed to being a point where within that, from year 3 to year 8, we went from having 2 sections that we had unfilled to actually being having wait lists. So these things do change. When she talks about PS 166, that is a very similar problem to what 9 had, except that 166 was a smaller, has a smaller catchment. 165 and 163 are one section. So I don't think that that's a startling thing. A lot of the kids, anyway, with that said, we didn't really suffer. We managed to work it out. And basically the section at 165 was created 10 years ago to address the 2 sections that were removed from 9. So the kids still existed. So I think when she talks about 166 needing some attention, she's probably right, but I don't think it's district-wide problem. And we may actually have more of a problem of having excess capacity if people don't return to the district, which I think is a much bigger potential problem for the district.
Thanks, Ira. Appreciate the thoughts. Well, Irena, you don't have your hand up. I saw a comment, but I'm always energetic to hear your thoughts because they were usually very concise. Is anything you want to share? I did see a comment in the chat.
Actually, I'm actually just taking notes and listening intently. It's a lot of issues, but I was responding to the DOB issue at the Trinity Lutheran. I'm surprised that the Department of Buildings can move on any type of eviction without alternative housing, So I just sent a text to someone who used to work for the Department of Homeless Services to find out what the guidelines are, but I'm in shock. I mean, I'm in shock listening to Susan's report. But, this idea that they would evict homeless youth in the middle of the winter during a pandemic because of building code violations, I was just trying to get some clarity from some of my colleagues who have worked for DHS or currently are at DHS. But I apologize that I've missed so many YEL meetings, and so I'm really just observing and listening. Thank you for calling on me, Stephen.
Well, can I turn to Irena's question?
Irena, I think we can call in the morning and find out from DHS what's happening, but
that would be great. And Roberta, if you could just send me a text so I won't keep going down this rabbit hole, because I'm already in it.
Helpful for sure.
Can I suggest we turn that to a question for Susan? Because Susan, my understanding of the program in the basement of Trinity Lutheran on 100th Street is that it's a church ministry, not a DHS site. Is that your understanding?
I don't know. But
okay. Peter would know. Peter
I believe. Yeah. I believe you're right, Mark.
Yeah, so reaching out to DHS wouldn't help in this instance because it's not under their jurisdiction in the first place. Which is probably why
but pressure on the mayor.
I'm a bit confused. So this is a homeless shelter that's not operated by the city. It's operated by the state. I mean, by the church.
It's a ministry.
They have.
Yeah, I don't know how they. I didn't even know you could operate a homeless shelter.
Yeah, you can
without notifying DHS.
Yeah, and I have a tiny connection to it because I have participated in efforts to cook meals to bring to the kids on Friday nights. It's kind of a movie night thing. So I'm pretty sure, I'm sure there's some sort of, Department of Health standards they have to meet, but it's not a shelter per se when you think about DHS sites. So I think Roberta was talking about applying, or maybe Susan was talking about applying pressure somewhere else, and that would be at the mayor's office or maybe this community affairs unit.
Tomorrow morning, first thing, I'll be on the phone with whoever can help me get to the bottom of this, and I'll be on the phone with Peter and the church. And my synagogue is very involved in, we've had a homeless shelter for 35 years that I think we can be helpful too. So we'll work this out in the morning.
And this is an issue that the city has identified: lack of safe spaces for LGBTQ young people. It's they were running around begging providers to take on this issue, and Goddard actually didn't, because it's not our area of expertise, youth shelters. But it just seems so heartless in the middle. I think the moral pressure would be wherever you can get it would be effective.
Whoever knows somebody important, let's call them tomorrow morning.
Call them all.
Well, it's been there forever, right?
I mean, certificate of occupancy problem.
Whatever, we're going to find out and we're going to get it done.
Yeah, it's a dingy basement. I mean, there's no getting around that.
What's
the best location, but
it's a
there,
church. It's not a residential building.
What has also happened is that because of COVID, the kids are now in there for most of the day, whereas in the past, they would go out and do things during the day. Now they're in there for a long time. So
it's also, sometimes it's this weird technical. We had a childcare center that was cited for lack of following the certificate of occupancy because it said childcare instead of daycare. And it took us 10 months to just get this, to just get a letter of no objection. So sometimes it's just like somebody just reads it one way as opposed to another way.
Yep.
The same document.
The letter of no objection is a very established procedure for childcare facilities. It also is used for buildings without certificates of occupancy where a use has been predates the 1938 building code, but it's generally not used to establish a new occupancy. So I don't know if that's necessarily applicable.
Peter, have you spoken to Mark Levine's office?
I have not.
If you can, so I think we've got a game plan. We got Roberta as an action item in the morning. If you can send me just a couple brief email around the problem, I will definitely get that to them tonight and try and follow up as well. I can get that to them and follow up and see if we can get someone on the phone tomorrow with you, whether it's
Mark, that's really important. We need to talk to Mark Levine as quickly as possible because he can call the right people at DOB as well.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I can get his rep. I can get someone in the office. I don't know Mark's schedule, but if you.
But you would talk to Eric or somebody.
Yes.
There's somebody at DOB in a fairly senior position who used to work in Gail's office and used to work in Helen's office, and that may be a good point of contact.
Who's that?
Ahmed Tigani, remember him?
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll be on it.
Yeah.
Steve, you and I'll be on it first thing in the morning, right?
Yeah, exactly. And again, Peter, if you can maybe just send me a 2 or 3 email, 2 or 3 lines in an email, I'll get it to Eric and Mark, and I'm sure I can talk to Eric in the morning and we'll see what we can do about it. But if you could just be the facts and stuff, I don't have all the notes.
Peter,
I'll try and get accurate information from Pastor Heidi Newmark.
But I mean, you can just give me the address, and just this is where it is. Here's the issue. Here's as we see it. We really need some help. I mean, it could be as basic as that, but like 1 or 2 lines describing it is good as well. But even just like address, name, things like that.
Peter, if you could copy.
Question.
Peter, if you could copy on that, and I'll also reach out to Corey Johnson's office.
Okay.
Well, I have a question. Are the DOB violations just what are the violations? I'm just curious. I didn't mean to prolong this.
We don't know.
I believe that it's that they are violating their certificate of occupancy by allowing youth to stay in the building, and they're saying that they shouldn't be allowed to reside there. Therefore, they're in violation of their certificate of occupancy.
Right, and they may not, the church may not even have the proper, I don't know, do they have showers? Do they have their own beds? I mean, I guess I'm even concerned about the conditions these kids are living in. And so I think it would be, I know maybe it's not a DHS site, but I think that they should also be notified in the event that this makeshift shelter can't continue. These young people have to go somewhere.
Except has the worship have a certain, and I'm not sure what it's called, but they have a certain right to shelter people?
This is a historic use of churches to provide refuge.
That may be the case, but you still have to provide a modicum of services. You just can't put people, you just can't, especially young people, they still need beds and showers.
No, they have beds and showers there.
Excuse me?
They do have beds, they have showers that they have access to throughout the day and night. And they also have access to a kitchen where they can put things together.
That's good to hear.
Yes, I totally understand what you're saying, Raina. I mean, but they do have access to basic things like that.
I'm not sure, not to play lawyer here, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm an architect, but I don't know if Callahan applies here. I'll leave that to the lawyer in the corner over there.
Well, in the world of getting stuff done, I just set a call with Eric Quello from Mark Levine's office tomorrow, so I'll give him, he responded. So we're doing things, yes.
Hey, Stephen, let's be in touch in the morning with you, me, and Peter.
You got it. Okay, I want to kind of, we have taken up a lot of our esteemed guest Susan's time, so I want to thank her. She was wonderful.
Thanks to all of you. This is really a pleasure. Thank you.
I do want to follow up, Susan, on that idea around devices. So perhaps you said something, and I had a couple extra questions, but we were here a long time, and I know everyone's hungry or wants to go to sleep, so I'll peg them for there. But I was super interested. I mean, I was super sad to hear about the stigma issue, and I'd love to understand a little bit more about that.
I'm sorry, which issue was that?
The issue about the stigma for the kids. I thought that was pretty sad to hear, and I guess I never thought about it, but it was actually very interesting. But I want to let you go. Thank you. We're going to do a little bit of committee business. We're going to be wrapping this up, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we just have our sort of general, any new or old business that anybody wants to bring up? I'll take that as the Bueller no, as I like to call it. So from one of my good movies. I see some people laughing and know what I'm talking about. So the last thing I like to, we always end with at YEL, and I'm hoping to go to other committees, just sort of thinking about next month. I know that Blanche and I, when we were speaking, kind of frame it like this was going to be, a lot of our issues cross over, right? So it's not just one or the other, but we sort of focused on youth. Obviously that bleeds into education. I think we were thinking about doing something on education, but that could change. There's certainly topics like the G&T program that came up that could be a conversation. And we had, Erica might have offered Linda for our next meeting as well. But any other ideas or topics that we want to just throw out while we have everyone here?
I don't know if you can still hear me.
We can.
You can, okay, because I've lost the picture. Natasha has raised a couple of times a question about criminality and our youth in the area, and we have.
Now we did lose you. Blanche, you muted yourself. I think I can try and unmute you. I'm asking to unmute you. I'm going to give you a little more time, but you did mute yourself. I'm going to give a few more seconds and I'm going to go on and then you can interrupt me if you come in.
I am sorry to test you. If we could get back to our question that Natasha raised about bringing in some of the community and youth serving people from the local precinct. We put them off in April when the pandemic hit, and that would be my suggestion for our either next meeting or the one after.
Okay.
Okay.
And we can keep. It's always good. Meet out well.
And they're already.
Yeah, that was Blanche. I think we're echoing. So any other ideas from anyone? I know I spoke to a lot of you for a couple weeks ago and I went on ideas, so I may call you up, but did you have something else, Natasha?
No, Stephen, I just want to return the favor to Blanche and bring up an idea that she had at some point last year about how, funds have been diverted from NYPD and they were supposed to go to social services. And I think Blanche had the idea of calling on someone who would have an idea, now that many months have passed, of how those funds have been deployed, used, what their impact has been. I don't know if we could get if Blanche has any idea of what sort of speakers would talk on that topic knowledgeably.
Okay. Another good idea.
Right. If I could jump in on Natasha, do you think maybe our council members would be the right people? Because especially Helen is involved in the budget. If anybody's tracking it, it probably would be them. Is that fair, or is that not where you're going?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Well, I think we've got some ideas and we'll start shaping them. And then certainly I would encourage to email ideas as well. But I think we've got 2 or 3 topics. We could spread them out. Generally, we kind of spread them out over the next 2 meetings, but it's always very helpful. And particularly it's helpful is if people know speakers. We all kind of have our little group of people we can access, but if somebody has other ideas as well, it's not just about ideas, but it could be somebody who they think would be, just a good speaker to bring in and we could shape it into a topic. So with that, 8:18, I think we're at the end of the meeting. Do we have to formally end these meetings, Mark? I'm still learning all the protocol. Do I ask for an adjournment or do I just get to do it these days?
I know the way I usually do it is that I ask for unanimous consent to adjourn.
Can we have unanimous consent to adjourn?
Objection. One thing I need to say to you, I just found the DOB violation, and I will cut and paste and send it to you, Stephen. It is regarding the non-complying use of an occupancy in the lower level. I'll cut and paste the violation. There's also a $2,500 fine against the church.
Okay, and typically those go to ECB and they knock it down to something far more modest.
Okay.
Mike,
we're closing up. I gotta get my kids staring at me. He's hungry.
Okay,
take it offline.
Why don't you send it to me as well?
Yeah,
and I can
you guys can take it offline.
a little an English translation.
Will do.
Could you send
Thank you, everybody. Very good meeting as always. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.